Hi, welcome to the Cancer Signal, a podcast presented by Grail, where we share the stories behind multi cancer early detection testing. I'm your host, Susanna Quinn. Today, we are welcoming Jack, who will be sharing his experience with multi cancer early detection testing and his cancer journey. Welcome to the Cancer Signal, Jack.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. To get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, and what do you do?
Well, I live in Elkhart, Indiana. I have been in the plastics industry for pretty much my whole life, but I did sell my company back in, of all times, 2020 during COVID, which was a little bit unusual. And I stayed on for the acquirer until the end of 24, and I was in a consulting role. So I've officially been retired, I guess, for about a year and a quarter. So adjusting to that right now. Like to enjoy spending time with obviously my family, and they're all over the place.
Congratulations, Jack, on a successful exit. That is a real accomplishment. Tell me, Jack, do you have a family history of cancer?
No, I do not.
Do you have any known cancer risk factors besides being over 50 years old? Do you have any other known cancer risk factors?
No, I do not, and did not at the time when I was diagnosed. So, um,
Do you follow the guideline recommended screenings your doctor suggests? For example, do you have colonoscopies?
yes, I do, and also have regular dermatology appointments. For looking for skin problems. But I've had a concierge doc for about 7 years, I believe. So I feel that I have, excellent healthcare and screenings. So
So you were symptom free, but you decided to look into multi-cancer early detection testing. I assume you heard about it from your concierge doctor. What made you decide to take the test?
well, it was just one of my, typical semi-annual appointments with him. And near the end, he said, "Hey, there's a new test available that it's called Galleri, and it can detect, I believe he said, up to 50 types of cancer with a simple blood screening." And for some reason, I said, "Heck, I'd like to have it." And so that's why I did it. It was just kind of one more thing to do from a screening perspective, even though it was such a new technology that he was offering. I was, just got my interest.
Very smart. Well, I understand your testing experience was a little different than some of the stories we've shared on this podcast because you took the test twice. Tell us what happened when you first took the MCED test.
Yeah, the first test was, I believe it was December of 22, and and my doctor said, "Hey, do you want me to call you with these results, whether they're good or bad, or how do you want me to handle this?" And I said, "Hey, whenever you get the results, just give me a call and then let me know." And about 2.5 weeks later, I was home. My wife was traveling somewhere, but you know, he said, "Hey, we've got a signal's been detected." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Well, you likely have some type of cancer." I said, "Well, where?" And he said, "Well, the signal's coming up, showing somewhere between your chest and your head." And obviously, I was in shock and very worried about it. And I was heading out west the next day for a couple weeks, so I knew I couldn't really see anybody or do anything. We talked about it for a bit, and when I got back, I went in to see him, and he had set up appointments with an ENT and a number of doctors to start doing some testing. And over the course of the next, I'm going to say, 2 to 3 months, I had CAT scans and MRIs and had an ear, nose, throat, exam, and they scoped my throat, and there was just nothing that came up. And there was we were frustrated. My wife was the only one that knew about it, and so in the end, I guess we kind of threw our hands up and said, "Hey, let's wait and retake this test 6 months after the first test."
So, tell me about your wife. I know it was a really stressful situation to have no symptoms and then to share this with her and to not really talk to anybody else about it.
Well, we both were reassured by, our doctor. She also had the test, but hers came back, with no signal. But he assured me and all the other doctors that I was talking to, going, when we were trying to find what the signal was, that, hey, this is extremely early. Wherever this is and whatever it is, the good news is that we're getting on this early, and there's likely going to be treatment. It's going to be treatable. So, I really had a lot of trust in that, you know, it wasn't going to be stage 4 or something like that. It was going to be because if it was something that was obvious, they would have found it. But, the reason we didn't tell anybody is because we really didn't have anything to say other than I had a positive signal come back on this test. And, you'd tell someone that. And so what does that mean? Well, I guess we really don't know yet. So it was really just a waiting. So I waited until July of 23 to retake the test.
So, when there is a cancer signal detected result and no cancer is found during diagnostic evaluation, Grail will provide a second test at no charge 6 months later. So, I'm certainly glad you took the test again. When you were going into the second testing, what were your expectations going for the second time?
Well, I'd hope there was going to be no signal would be my preference.
Well, thank goodness you took the second test. How did you feel when you got the results the second time around?
So that result come back with a positive signal as well, but this time it was more isolated. Now it was said it was somewhere between my neck and my head. So it was which, that's pretty concerning to me, which I don't, you know, at the time, I know a lot more about cancer now than I did then, but
Right,
I don't think, I mean, that is not a place that you want to think that there's cancer.
not
So,
at all.
right. So I was extremely concerned and really anxious to find out what it was so we could start whatever treatment are needed. Cause it was a very scary time that believing that I had some type of cancer, but not knowing where or exactly what it was. So,
I'm so sorry that you and your family had to go through that. So, what were the next steps towards getting a diagnosis after the second test?
well, it was, all of the same tests that I had done in the past I had MRIs and CT scans and also, um, the ear, nose, throat, scopes and, just trying to find anything. And, it was exactly what I'd done the 6 months prior to it. And it was frustrating because again, there was nothing that was popping up, right, that was easy to find. But so they started going through the same battery of tests as they had done before. And this goes on for probably 3 months again, different doctors
Mm.
looking for anything. And in the end, my ENT, he said, "Hey, I've got to go in and take some biopsies out of your throat, and I'm gonna have to go to the hospital, put you under, and see if we can see anything down there." The reason that he had to do that is a month or so prior to that, on a CT scan, a lymph node lit up it was cancerous. I had one, and so my initial thought was, "Hey, fine, go cut that thing out." Well, that's not possible. Um, so they said we got to find out where this cancer originated, and typically it would be testicular cancer that would cause that. And I had my tonsils out when I was a kid, baby. So we had to find out where it was coming from so it could be treated properly. And this is what I learned. So last resort, because I could not identify it, was to put me under. It was approximately Christmas time of 22, and look, put me out, go down where they can get deep into my throat and look for stuff. And as he was in there, he took about 5 biopsies, and one of them he thought looked a little bit odd. It was on one of my tonsil remnant. There was a small little piece that he picked up, and sure enough, when they tested that, that is the site of where the cancer was. So then it's, within the next 2 weeks, I'd seen a radiologist, and the treatment was going to be, 7 weeks of radiation therapy on that area, and which sounded pretty good to me, or not bad, but it sounded like, hey, okay, that doesn't seem too difficult. About 5 days before I'm going to start this radiation, they did another scan to make sure that nothing had spread, and by now I had two lymph nodes that
Mm,
were cancerous. And I'm thinking, well, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is now it goes into chemotherapy as well. I didn't tell anybody until right before the treatments were going to start, because obviously I was going to be pretty much, daily, treatments. So uh, at that point, I had told people that needed to know. So
mhm. Well, that's a incredibly stressful thing to go through, and I know studies have shown that people who have a good community around them when dealing with cancer fare better. So, I'm glad that you were able to bring your family together and face it.
before this, well, I said, "What can I do, doc? Well, what do you recommend?" And he said, "You need to gain as much weight as you possibly can, because you're going to lose it. Trust me." And sure enough, I was able to. I mean, I felt fine the first month and a half. So I was just eating like crazy and pretty much living a normal life, and thinking, this isn't such a bad situation. I was still working out, but I think it was around week 5. The switch was flipped, and I wouldn't have wished that how I felt on my worst enemy
Mhm.
from week 5 through week 7, and probably then even through week 9. I basically went a month or so only being able to eat like a protein um, shake with a little bit of ice cream in it. So, and it hurt doing that. But anyway, the recovery was, well, probably at about week 12 or 13. I was able to start eating pretty normally again. So it was just really lack of food and just feeling, terrible. I don't even remember how many prescriptions I had, so that, try to make the pain manageable and being able to sleep. But, I gradually felt better and better, better. And now, I mean, I've had follow up tests, and I'm cancer free at this point in time. And actually, I've asked my doc. I was in there just last week, and I said, "When can I retake the Galleri test?" And he says, "Well, they suggest that you wait 3 years." Well, my 3 years is coming up here in July on when my last test was. So I'm going to have that test performed again. I just think, um, had I not caught that, who knows when it would have been caught. In the end, it was diagnosed as stage 1 um, cancer, throat cancer, which is unheard of.
Thank goodness you discovered it at stage 1. So tell me, how is your health today?
Well, it's it's excellent. I was just at my doctor last week, and he's all my numbers look good. I'm blessed and happy. So,
That's terrific. Jack, so how do you feel when you reflect on this experience?
well, I'd say I feel lucky, and that's lucky that I had the doctor that I have, and that he suggested this Gallery test to me. Had I not had him, I wouldn't even have known about this test. And you know, that cancer that I had was going to happen whether I took this test or not. And the fact that, what likely would have happened, it would have continued to grow until all of a sudden I had a lump or something on the side of my, in my throat or my neck that I recognized while shaving or something. And heck, at that point, who knows? I mean, it could have been stage 2, 3, or 4, and maybe the end result would have been much different than where I am today. So, fortunate in a lot of ways that it was caught early.
Absolutely. We don't have a cure for cancer, and early detection is one of the best tools. So I'm hearing that refrain commonly from people who take multi-cancer early detection tests. So, what would you say to people thinking about looking into a multi-cancer early detection test?
Well, I would certainly recommend it if you're, concerned at all about your health. If you have, if it's available to you, I would highly recommend it.
Well, thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today and sharing your story. Listeners, be sure to visit Grail's YouTube channel to watch Jack's story there too. We will link it in the show notes for this episode. And once again, Jack, I really appreciate your coming on and talking about your experience and your story.
You're welcome.
This is the Cancer Signal presented by Grail. Please subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And thank you so much for listening.
The Galleri test is prescription only. The Galleri test is recommended for use in adults with an elevated risk for cancer, such as those age 50 or older. It is not recommended in individuals who are pregnant, 21 years old or younger, or undergoing active cancer treatment. Galleri does not detect a signal for all cancers and should be used in addition to routine cancer screening. False positive and false negative results do occur.